can tell you that we're talking about seconds to react rather than minutes. A missile which comes in less than 12 feet off the deck at very high speed, many hundreds of miles an hour, gives us a very short time of response.
¿Cómo no? El ataque contra Sheffield fue hecho por dos aviones Super Étendard con un misil cada uno. Lanzaron los dos aviones simultáneamente a una cierta distancia del buque sobre un ecoradar que habían tenido.
The small number of people who saw this missile appearing only had time to say take cover, and we're talking about 3 or 4 seconds later the missile striking HMS Sheffield.
There's no doubt at all that the Falklands campaign was, it has to be said, of great benefit to us. It is desperately sad that one has to lose life in the process, but it gives us an opportunity to test our training, to test our men, to test our equipment under live combat conditions.
The first of these tests came from this, an air-launched Exocet missile. From the attack on HMS Sheffield and other engagements, the Royal Navy learned important lessons during the war. 4 years later, the evidence about these lessons comes from both sides, British and Argentine. All the Exocet attacks, including the one on Sheffield, were led by this naval officer, Commander Colombo. The Exocet missiles were fitted to Super 8 Ondar aircraft. The aircraft were designed to be flown either from carriers or from land. Sheffield, a Type 42 destroyer, was surprised with just 4 seconds warning. The question the British asked after the war was how a destroyer of Sheffield's class, designed specifically to deal with aircraft attacks, could have been surprised in this way. Why was the incoming aircraft not spotted on its long-distance air warning radar? In part, it was because Britain wasn't the only nation with Type 42 destroyers.
Teniendo en cuenta que teníamos buques argentinos, destructores tipo 42, que eran exactamente iguales a los buques que teníamos que enfrentar, hicimos un estudio muy detallado de cómo penetrar por debajo de las defensas radar para poder hacer el ataque con los dos elementos más importantes que nos iban a asegurar el triunfo, es decir, la sorpresa y la discreción.
A technique called pecking the lobes was what the Argentines had already practiced against their own Type 42s. The lobes of an air warning radar have a very particular shape. As the aircraft approaches the ship, it starts to enter the radar lobe. At this point, it's not in deep enough for the ship to pick it up. A radar warner in the cockpit tells the pilot to drop in height. By dropping in height, each time he pecks the lobe, the aircraft can escape radar detection almost all the way in. Then, at a range of 25 miles, it has to fire its missile. But to find its target, the aircraft has had to climb, and for a few seconds it's been forced into the radar lobe. This is the ship's first real chance to spot the attack. In the operations room, the radar screens are under constant watch. This requires great concentration. What they're looking for is any change in the expected picture, any unexplained blips which would suggest an enemy aircraft. There's the first in the top left-hand corner, the second, and the third. Nothing that time. That's it. The aircraft has already turned back for home and the missile has been fired. It quickly drops in height to just above the waves. Exocet is a sea-skimming missile designed to fly under radar cover. Sheffield's radar was somewhat elderly, and the calm weather on that day allowed the missile to fly in particularly low. Nothing was seen on radar. But Sheffield had another way of detecting an Exocet attack. Every Type 42 destroyer has equipment on its superstructure for picking up the distinctive sound of enemy radar. This man has to identify the source. The first opportunity comes from the emissions from the radar dish in the nose of the enemy aircraft, which the aircraft uses to identify its target. To try to escape detection, the aircraft flies in with its radar switched off. But before it can launch the Exocet, it has to climb and locate the ship with its radar. This beam is switched on for the shortest possible time. In a few seconds, the ship should realize that it's under attack. The aircraft then feeds the location of the ship from its radar into the Exocet and fires. Two minutes later, there's a final opportunity to hear the attack. That's because the missile itself has a radar. This is used to guide the missile in the final phase of the attack. Again, to minimize detection, the Exocet flies in with its radar switched off. But with 30 seconds to go, the Exocet has to switch on its radar to hunt for the target. When it finds the ship, the Exocet locks on. The sound of the locked-on radar should be heard by the ship and is the final warning of an imminent attack. In the end, Sheffield didn't hear the radar of either aircraft or missile. Why not? In the minutes up to the attack, Sheffield was, by coincidence, transmitting on its satellite communications terminal. This piece of equipment. The problem was one of frequencies. The frequency of the Étendard radar and the frequency of the Exocet radar were blotted out by the similar frequency of the satellite terminal. Sheffield couldn't hear the attack because it had inadvertently deafened itself. Within 3 years, the Navy had its answer to the major lesson from the loss of Sheffield, specially equipped helicopters to provide an umbrella of radar cover. Inside this weatherproof bag is a radar scanner which would provide early warning for a task force. The political decision to give the Navy's aircraft carriers their own airborne early warning was taken the day Sheffield was hit. Once the helicopter is airborne, the radar scanner is swung down to give a full 360-degree coverage. The helicopter then climbs to several thousand feet above the task force. At this height, Earth curvature is much less of a problem than at sea level. The two observers can see up to 150 miles from the task force. In this position, they can control their Sea Harriers, but crucially they can direct them out to intercept enemy intruders. With airborne early warning, no Super Étendard ought to have got within 150 miles of the task force without being spotted. In the Falklands War, the Sea Harriers had to work without such guidance. So what was their role?